Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of A Lost Plot, the podcast by storytellers for storytellers so that we can tell better stories ourselves. As always, I'm your host, Maverick, and today we have back with us our co-host, Andrew, to review a new series. That's right. You guys were like, oh my goodness, they finished Tron and they finished Marvel. There's nothing else to review. Of course not. There's plenty to review. We still haven't gotten to The Godfather, to Indiana Jones, and to all these other great series. So there's a lot more coming at some point in the future. We'll get to those. But right now, we're talking about another series, which we are starting to get out of the way or to bless your ears with enjoyment. We're talking about Pirates of the Caribbean. That's right. We're doing with number one in the series, The Curse of the Black Pearl. This was a 2003 release based off of the ride in Disneyland, which was a American swashbuckler fantasy film. The story was by Ted Elliott, Terry Rossio, Stuart Beattie, and Jay Wolpert. I apologize if I botched any of those names, but whatever. Ted and Terry were both responsible for the screenplay as well, and it was directed by Gore Verbinski. So those are the main, and of course, we're going to give the honorable mention to the producer because he is well known for this series. Jerry Bruckheimer was involved in this film, so that's what you got to create the first in a multi-series movie that is now well known especially in the pirate world. So if you're thinking of a pirate film, you're probably thinking of these. We're going to talk about if that was well done and why that's the case today. Andrew, what are your initial thoughts and rating for Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl?
This is a thoroughly enjoyable movie to watch. Disney should make more films like it.
Yes, agreed. I think there are reasons why this film is well known and well loved. In fact, they didn't expect it to get the accolades it got back in the day. It was more like we did this test and it passed with flying colors, getting lots of awards at the time that spawned a whole series of films which are still well known. So there is a reason that it got accolades, I think. I gave it a 6.8. So pretty high, actually higher than I thought I was, because honestly, when I first watched these films, I go, okay, this is going to be crap. And I was thinking of when I watched Transformers, and Transformers is a movie I also well love. I grew up with it. There's a lot of nostalgia for it. And if you look at that first review early on in the podcast, Transformers got like a 2. I mean, let's be honest. It's an amazing film to enjoy. It's not actually a good film, though. This one, I actually think has a lot going for it, has some interesting things going for it, and I think that there is some interesting discussion warranted in this one, but I could be proven otherwise by Andrew. What was your rating? You didn't give it.
A 6.8.
Nobody made money today.
That's actually pretty crazy.
That's a first for us? I don't know if we've ever...
It's happened like once before.
Technically
it was a 6.69, but...
Okay, so a 6.7.
Oh, no. Sorry. No, it was a 6.9 something. It was like right below that.
Yeah, okay.
So I ended up rounding up, but...
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, anyways, pretty incredible. We'll get into why we think this film deserves a 6.8 today. If you're curious, keep listening. But before we do, of course, if you have not watched this film and are curious what we're going to be talking about, Andrew, can you give everyone a summary of what Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl is all about?
This film follows the story of Captain Jack Sparrow. It starts out mystery, intrigue. They're on the water. They find a magic little coin. Elizabeth Swann does. She grows up. Then we interact with her as an adult. She's trying to be married off to someone. During all of this, Captain Jack Sparrow seems to just chaotically meander throughout the plot and the lives of all of the characters that exist within this world. It comes to the surface that this gold medallion is actually of quite a bit of import and matters for the breaking of the curse of the Black Pearl. Or what is it? Cortez's gold. That's what they refer to it as.
Yep.
As a result of it hitting the water, it awakens the undead crew of the Black Pearl. They come to take it. They mistake Elizabeth Swann for the for Elizabeth Turner. They kidnap her and they go to break the curse. And Will Turner, who is madly in love with her, decides to break Jack Sparrow out of prison and follow suit.
Yep, pretty much. It's a story about cursed gold, about piracy, about owed debts, and about backstabbing one another for the sake of your own ends. And what does it mean to be loyal? So that's what you're going to get into today. If you're curious, keep listening because we will get into it for sure. But let's start off as we always do with that opening scene. You have that opener where you have young Will Turner and young Elizabeth Swann on the HMS Dauntless going across the sea, and they see the remains of a ship that was attacked. They find this young boy, Will Turner, on a raft, and Elizabeth Swann is watching while they continue to look for other survivors, and sees that he has this cursed gold around his neck, which she doesn't know is cursed yet, and proceeds to take it from him as she realizes he's a pirate, thinks, oh, if they see it with this, he's dead. So instead, she decides to quote-unquote save him by taking this gold. What are your thoughts on that opening scene as it leads into the rest of the plot? Fast forwards to them as adults. You know, if you've seen this film, you know what we're talking about. It's a classic, right? What are your thoughts, Andrew?
I think the opening's great. You have the setting with like the music, the fog. They're on the ocean. You get the intrigue of, oh, there's pirates. You're not sure what's going on. It then quickly transitions to an adult Elizabeth Swann who still has the necklace. And then we get the introduction of Jack Sparrow, who honestly, the introduction was great. It gave you everything you need to know about this guy. He's Jack Sparrow. I mean, I feel like nothing else is going to do him justice. So yeah, I enjoyed the opener. I think it is definitely more than enough to keep the audience engaged.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, you have all of the core elements of what you need. I mean, this is classic Disney getting to the point in the way it needs to, right? We've talked about this with The Lion King. We've talked about this with other films. Some of the early on Marvel movies had this as well, where they have a very tight opener that deals with the basics of introducing you to the characters early on and to what's important in the film. This one does all of that, right? You have Will Turner, Elizabeth Swann, and very early on you get Jack Sparrow as well as he gets onto the dock. And you get key things about them as well, right? Piracy is involved in this. You have Elizabeth Swann being the quote unquote innocent girl who's the damsel in distress, trying to be a brave woman in a world of piracy, right? You have Will Turner, this washed up young man who it's mysterious how he got there. You have the cursed gold right at the beginning, which becomes more and more developed as an instrument in the film early on, and you get the foreboding of the skull and crossbones in the background as you see the pirate flag, right? All of those things leading to, we know what this film's about. It's about pirates. We know who the good guys are. We know who the bad guys are. And we got the weirdo who's getting onto the dock saying, I'm not going to tell you my name. I'll give you a little extra gold and then steal your money as I walk away, right? Everything about this is telling you right off the bat, these are the characters we're dealing with. This is the kind of characters we are involved with here. So, yeah, very great. Right off the start, you're engaged, you're hooked. If you are here for a pirate movie, you got a pirate movie. And that's what you're going to continue to see as the film progresses. So, excellent in regards to that. I'm not going to say more about that because we should talk about the main character. Andrew, who is the main character and are they compelling?
Jack Sparrow.
Okay.
I think he's compelling. I think he has a lot of. I was thinking about this when I was filling out the questionnaire because one portion of the questions is the character compelling? Are they flawed? Are there things that they need to work through? And then another question is, do they go through transformation? So for the is he flawed part, almost full points. Like he's got arrogance, moral ambiguity, self-interest. Great build for a character. Does he transform by the end of the movie? I would say to some extent, yes. Although because he's so ambiguous as to what he actually wants throughout this entire film, we don't really know if he changed. So that does make it difficult.
Yeah, we will get to that for sure. Yes.
Yeah, so it's a little difficult to read his character, but I feel like that's a part of who he is as an individual. And kind of why they're able to make so many movies too with this specific character. But that said, I think that his character has a lot going for him, right? He is He's almost exactly what like every bard in D&D wishes they could be, or envisions themselves being, just going around, finessing their way through life, bumbling around, not giving a crap about how they do things, just knowing I'm going to come out on top in the end because I've got excellent charisma. So I mean, he's not necessarily seeking redemption. He just wants his ship back. That is his primary goal in this movie. And I don't think it really changes, right? He may like say certain things or make deals with different people that seems like he might want something else or the other. Even if he does want secondary things or have secondary objectives, his primary goal is always just the Black Pearl. And it stays that way like throughout the entire series.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, this is one of those few times. I'll start with Jack Sparrow, but this is one of the few times where I actually did give it multiple primary characters, partially because I think Jack Sparrow, Elizabeth Swann, and Will Turner get roughly equal time on the screen, but also because each of them does have their individual arcs. Now, it's interesting, I think, to think about it from that perspective, simply because normally when you see a film that has multiple characters and they're trying to do this like everyone's the main character type scenario, they're oftentimes doing it from the perspective of we are dealing with a team up version, right? We're talking about the Avengers, we're talking about other films like that where they're having multiple characters who are all striving for the same goal. In this film, you don't really get that, and that's because this is rife with backstabbing, second chances, second guessing what somebody wants, etc., etc. And so while they're all loosely on the same side, especially at the beginning, they're not really friends, right? And you get that from the start when Will Turner does break Jack Sparrow out of jail. And he goes, basically, we're not friends, but I know that you're going to help me get what I want. And I know you know something about my dad. So what's going on, right? So there's situations like that that are just litters this film. And yes, the conflict, I think the conflict is amazing, right? The idea of the flaws is this is why flawed characters are so good for a film. It's that it's like basically, you know why the news is always going, oh, we report on the bad things that are going on? Because it's a train wreck that you can't help but watch happen, right? Flaws are like a great way to do that in a cinematic form where you go, this guy is an absolute disaster. What's going to happen, right? And that's what you get with Jack Sparrow, where he is just a bumbling fool in some ways. And this is the question that they pose at the beginning of the film, and in some ways is continually discussed as the films progress. Does Jack Sparrow have a plan, or does he make it up as he goes along? You don't really know. And in some ways, it's like, oh, it's definitely he's making it up at some points. And other times, it's like, oh, he definitely had this planned out. That was so smart. And so you never really know what is going on with this guy because he's just going on in life and just doing his thing, and it seems to work out in the craziest of fashions. So yeah, 100%. Clearly just a guy out there for his own self-interest. He's clearly got some serious grudges that he holds in this film, and that drives him for a lot of things that he does. But at the same time, he's willing to forego doing the right thing for his own ends multiple times throughout the film. And you see that as well in smaller degrees with other characters as they're introduced to the world of piracy, right? Where Elizabeth Swann starts out as like, the innocent young dove, if you will, who's the damsel in distress. And then she gets put in situations where she can make a decision, and she does things that are a little underhanded to help achieve her own ends, right? She gets Jack Sparrow, like jumping ahead a little bit, but she gets Jack Sparrow drunk later on to try to get off the island, and goes against what he would want, blowing up all the rum and making a massive fire. And then later on, she tells Norrington, James Norrington, the leader or the Commodore. Is he a Commodore? I forget if he's a Commodore, but he's the leader of the British armies in this
I think
film.
he is Commodore in this film.
That's right. He just became Commodore Norrington.
Yeah, and then he got awarded. He gets de-ranked in the next one.
That's right. More than de-ranked. Fired. But anyways, yes, so Norrington's like well, I actually forget why I got on Norrington for a second there, but anyways, she ends up lying to him. That's where I was going with that. And saying that she was going to marry him for the sake of, and uses him to get her own ends in that one. You see Will Turner, he starts off as a law-abiding man, trying to do the right thing, and in the purpose of pursuing his love interest and making sure she's safe, he ends up breaking the law, breaking a swashbuckling pirate out of jail to achieve his own ends, and it starts him down a trail of like doing wrong things to try to achieve his own ends. So it's interesting to see this, and we'll get into this more, I'm sure, but the devolving of some of these characters, if you will, as they are trying to achieve certain goals, what they compromise to achieve those goals. So those are my general thoughts on the other two. I don't know if you have thoughts on Elizabeth Swann and Will Turner, but those are probably welcome.
Elizabeth Swann. I mean, we had our jokes about her during the film, backstabbing. Will Turner, I think he becomes more interesting when you get the revelation that his dad was a pirate, and that his dad is crucial to breaking this curse, and thus they have to seek him out. I did like, in the back of my mind, I'm also thinking like, okay, Bootstrap Bill's technically still alive on the Flying Dutchman, but does that mean they could have used his blood? Does he even have blood at that point? I don't know. But that said, I do think that I think Will Turner's compelling. He has his whole motivation in life. They have a pretty good explanation for why he's good at fighting with a sword, right? That's literally all he does is practices. So it makes sense for a character who has never seen combat to still be able to hold his own in the multiple instances of combat that he ends up meeting. He's also clearly not this like naive child, right? He overhears Jack and Gibbs' conversation about him being leverage, knocks Jack Sparrow out. I do think it is quite funny though, because Will Turner is the character who likes to think things out and plan, and somehow Jack is always like 3 steps ahead of him, and he's not obviously not planning a lot of these things out in the same way that Will is, right? Even if he is like planning in some instances, it's more of just kind of, I'm just really good at making do with anything that gets thrown my way. So yeah, he would be great in Twilight Imperium.
That's funny. It's also interesting because there is a sense in which there's a huge contrast in this film between the world of the pirates and the world of the British, right? And this idea that Will comes from the world of the British, and he's having to deal with adjusting, I guess, if you will, to the world of the pirates. And that's where he's trying to be 2 steps ahead and trying to figure things out and trying to have a plan. Versus Jack Sparrow, it's almost like he's lived in this world for so long and knows how to play the game that it's just organic for him. It's natural for him to play the sides that need to be played to get his own ends. Versus Will Turner is trying hard to do that and ends up failing. Even to some degree, you see this with Norrington, where he is trying to play the game, but he is also so brand new to playing it like a pirate that his plans don't exactly work out the way that he wants. So, once again, it's almost like the world of the pirates, the code of the pirates is the one that wins at the end of the day, and that's what you're going to get throughout this film. But definitely interesting for both of those characters. You see that they are drawn into this conflict in a singular moment where the Black Pearl comes to the harbor at Port Royal, and they attack the harbor and end up taking Elizabeth Swann along with the gold medallion from Cortez's treasure and taking it back to Isla de Muerta. And that's what takes Elizabeth, throws her into the plot, takes Will in his desperate attempt to save his love, goes after them, and of course Jack Sparrow gets carried along in the process as he sees it as an opportunity to reclaim the Black Pearl as his own. What are your thoughts on getting involved in the plot and how this was an instrumental role that affected everyone?
It's good. This movie was constantly moving us along. There were no dead zones, if you will. Yeah, I mean, I think it is done in such a way that the 3 main characters, as you've put it, really just progress through the story seamlessly. Like, there's no moment in this film where I'm going like, what are we doing here now?
Mhm.
It's more of what's coming next. So yeah, I thought it was great.
Yeah. It's also interesting to think about it in regards to a lot of these films have this dynamic of this is getting slightly ahead of this inciting incident, if you will, but they have a clear good and a clear bad, right? And we just talked about this with Tron Ares. These are clearly the good guys, these are clearly the bad guys, and that's a whole train wreck on its own that we already discussed. You can look at that in the last review. But in regards to this one, it's interesting because there's constant power dynamics that are shifting, right? This person allies with this other person to achieve their ends here, and they shift alliances when it is more beneficial for them to join that alliance in another situation, right? And so there's a sense in which part of the dynamic that always keeps the wheels turning is that people are constantly changing sides, right? Who you're allied with now may not be the person you're allied with in 20 minutes, right? So it's so good that it can be such a tight film and also have such shifting alliances in the middle of the film. It's a really interesting dynamic, something you don't necessarily see a lot in films today, and it only goes well because you have so many, I guess, immoral characters, if you will, characters who are so invested in their own self-interest that they're willing to shove anyone else aside for their own ends, which is just when somebody thinks of a pirate, you think that they would act that way. So they lean hard into that in this film. Very interesting, great for the conflict to come around once again. So that, I don't know if you have more to add to that, but if not, then let's get into the villains of this film because they are critical to driving the plot forward as well. We have two primary groups that are the opponents of our quote unquote heroes in this film, right? They're trying to shift their dynamics around both the British under the control of Commodore Norrington and, of course, Captain Hector Barbossa, the leader of the Black Pearl and the one who is with the cursed crew. What are your thoughts on Barbossa? Let's start off with them.
I think Barbossa's interesting. I think he becomes more interesting as the films progress. I didn't give him full points. I gave him maybe like half points, a little more than that. He's got all the motive to be there, but for all intents and purposes, I feel like he kind of just fits the role of your average pirate captain in this film. I don't know if you had any other thoughts on him as a character.
He is somewhat of a mirror to Jack Sparrow. The difference is that he's come out on top a lot more early on in the film, and so he is this person who had almost is like the what if you will, Jack Sparrow, where it's like Jack Sparrow did not get the gold before he got shoved off and mutinied against, right? And so Barbossa is the one who's in control. He's the one who's in charge, and he does all of the piracy things that Jack Sparrow was going to do, but instead he's the one who gets cursed and has to deal with the consequences of it. And you see that he continues to live the piracy life, but now trying to reconcile the curse that he has with the life he wants to live. And so it's like, it's kind of interesting. It's not much more nuanced than that. So yeah, he's not like a super nuanced character. He's probably the stereotypical pirate, if you will, that you would see in the leadership role of a pirate. And I do think they get more nuanced with that one as well, with newer characters in later films. Davy Jones as an example, or for example, even Barbossa himself has more nuance as the film progresses. So
I do think one thing that he does comes from his character and his dialogue is when he reveals that, like, or I think it was him. They were, or maybe it was Gibbs. It was somebody in the film talks about Jack Sparrow and how when they were going to the Ile de Muerta, Jack had the heading and he was convinced to give it up, which I think makes Jack's character more interesting because it's like this guy wasn't always like this. He was a more trusting individual before. Now he's just a crazy guy.
yeah, and it's like how there is some question as to why did the entire crew turn against him and stuff like that, which isn't really fully answered, even in later films. But this idea that clearly the crew saw Barbossa as the stronger leader that needed to push them forward into the glory of being a pirate, if you will. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and some of those things are left unanswered, and that's okay. It's not like you have to answer every question when it comes to discussing a film. But let's talk about Norrington. Norrington is the good guys in regards to the real world, right? He is the British trying to establish law and order in a lawless sea. What are your thoughts on the Commodore?
Commodore's great. He's got compelling reason to be involved. He has this like idea of honor and chivalry that he's trying to measure up to. Obviously him and Elizabeth never do get together, but he is given this fantasy. The thing that makes it unfortunate for him is he gets played by basically every person in this film. And he's like, just took on this position. This is what he's been striving for his whole life. As soon as he gets it, all hell breaks loose. And he interacts with the infamous Jack Sparrow. He loses the Black Pearl. He loses the woman of his dreams to some random swordsmith, blacksmith that lived in the village. And on top of all of that, she pulls the "I will marry you if you do this." And he's like, okay, fine, I'll do it. If that's worth it. Up, psych.
Yes.
And then after all of it, he's still he still chooses the honorable decision.
Yeah. He's definitely got this strong code of honor that drives him for sure. And that's he's trying to do the right thing no matter what, and trying to be the gentleman in all of the things that he does. And so it's once again him trying to be law and order in a lawless world, and him trying to deal with that with the likes of Jack Sparrow just throwing their wrench into everything. Here you go, is definitely a difficulty for him, to say the least. So yeah, he's definitely a interesting character for the entire film, and he even gets more nuanced as the films progress. So I would say of the entire series, he's probably one of my more favorite characters in the series, just because he has such a contrast to everyone else and is such an interesting character that they end up playing with, even more so than some of the other British characters you see developed later on in the series.
Well, I think what's interesting is like he's meant to represent not the British rulership, if you will, right? You get that one guy in the next two films who's like much higher ranking than Norrington, who represents kind of the power hungry leadership of the British Empire, or the naval element of it. Norrington is just a British citizen who believes in this moral code and what the British Empire is meant to represent, not the corruption that has already taken it over. And he's trying to take his moral code and combat piracy with it.
Definitely. No, he's great. I mean, it's also interesting to see characters like this. I like to see them. It's the perfect contrast in a piracy movie, right? Especially with all these immoral characters. He is trying to be a shining light in the middle of that. And another great example of that type of thing showing up is Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I bring it up fairly often in the podcast because it's such a great example. But the idea that the antagonist in the film is the one who's straining for what is right, what is honorable, what is true, and trying to do the right thing in the midst of evil people, right, is a great bastion in the story. So I like his character. I don't know that I have more to say to that other than I wish I saw more films like this with characters like this. So I'm going to leave it at that. But let's continue with the plot. You know, you see all of these characters. We've discussed a little bit how we could go back and forth about each of the nuances of who betrays who backstabs who. Suffice it to say, there's a lot of that in this film. If you want to get all of the nuance of that, you're just going to have to watch it if you haven't. So yeah, just do it. And you get to the point where they are on the island. They realize Elizabeth Swann is not the blood of Bootstrap Bill, which is what the cursed pirates initially thought, right? And they thought they needed her blood in order to break the curse. Turns out that's not the case. Will Turner is the true blood of a pirate who can break the curse, and now they go off to get him, capture him, and bring him back to the island. Obviously, a bunch of switcheroos happen in the middle of that, right? And then you have this climactic dual fight scene that happens where the cursed pirates go off to the British to try to destroy the British. At the same time, Jack Sparrow and Will Turner, and then later on Elizabeth Swann, go and fight Barbossa and a few of his minions to try to take control of the gold and to break the curse at a convenient time to destroy the cursed pirates' control of the high seas and control of Black Pearl. What are your thoughts on the climax of this whole crazy back and forth backstabbing movie?
You don't really get lost, even though there is a lot of chaos that's going on. Especially once you introduce like the amount of times that Jack switches sides. And by the end, Elizabeth Swann's like, who's Jack's side on? And then he looks at her, he's like, right now, ours, I think. So, in terms of like the increased tensions, I think they do it good. I don't think Jack really experiences any loss per se in this film, although it is hard to have a character like this experience loss. He's not really given, other than his ship, right? That's probably the one way you could have him experience loss. And rum, I guess, which I guess he does experience the loss of rum on the island.
That was devastating.
He was like, his mind was breaking. He was like, I can't imagine someone would do this to so much delicious loot. So I didn't really give him points for like, because there's like a question about world-shattering loss, and he doesn't really experience loss in this film.
Right.
You could argue he experienced it prior to the film when his crew turned on him and he lost his ship, but we never see that. Mm-hmm. Even like Will Turner and Elizabeth Swann don't really experience loss as the film progresses.
Yeah, I mean, I think the goal, and yeah, I didn't give him a ton of points for that either, but the idea was that Captain Jack Sparrow is shipwrecked again. Elizabeth Swann is shipwrecked as well. Will Turner is now captured by the cursed pirates. There is nothing going for them at this point. What are they going to do? Well, Commodore Norrington shows up and they make a deal with the quote-unquote devil and say, I'm going to marry you if you do this. But she's a liar, so, so much for that.
Well, it's also like, I think, because you were talking about, does Jack Sparrow know beforehand? Like, is he planning this stuff out? I would make the case there's no freaking way he's planning this stuff out. Because the amount of times that, like, Elizabeth Swann does stuff and he's just like, okay. Or, like, Will Turner does stuff and he's like, well, now I gotta rethink that. Like, with her burning the rum, he never would have done that. He was willing to just wait until a ship happened by while he just drank himself away. And that, like, even when he was talking to her, he's like, the company is much better this time.
Right.
So, and then, like, when she makes the deal, she's like, I'll marry you. You can just see him, like, in the background just going, he's like, I can make this work.
Yeah.
Not bad. It's like when Maverick sees the rest of his party members doing something. Okay. Yeah, I think we should do that.
Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, Jake, sign on the dotted line.
Also just like the amount of times he's like with Norrington, I will give you this, but think of the glory and honor you will gain from taking down the Black Pearl. Goes to Barbossa. Think of how many ships you will have if you take out Norrington.
Right.
Like, he's
doing the full-on salesman, bitch.
Yes, and he's like the full drunken stupor too. That just makes it so funny.
Yeah.
So
yeah, 100%. And this is probably when it comes to change for him, right? The questionable aspect, because there is a strong sense of loyalty, and what is there loyalty in the high seas? Can you be loyal? What does it mean to be loyal when you're dealing with a bunch of backstabbing betrayals, right? And can you be quote unquote in some form or fashion honorable as a pirate. And that's what you get to some degree with Jack Sparrow, where it's like, not really sure. There's a certain sense you could make the case that no, he's just there for selfish reasons. He was trying to get the Black Pearl. He gets the Black Pearl, and he decided that allying himself with Will Turner and Elizabeth Swann was the best way to do that, right? At the same time, you also see that he had already made a deal to get the Black Pearl with Barbossa, right? And make Barbossa the Commodore and him be the leader of the Black Pearl, and he can have his ship back, and he just has a little bit of a debt that he has to Barbossa that he has to continually pay him some of his funds, right? Could still get that end, and that was the safer option, but he decides, no, he's going to stick with the riskier of the options and go with the people who are mortal and try to fight Barbossa to stop him and destroy him and get the Black Pearl all to himself without any strings attached, if you will. You could argue that that was a case where he ends up siding on the side of the loyalty for the people that were helping him throughout this entire time, his true friends, if you will. Do you think that that case can be made? Do you think it's compelling? Do you think it's not? What are your thoughts?
I guess what do you mean? What do you mean by like what? Anyways, I'm not sure what you're asking, to be honest.
Well, what I'm saying is that there's a situation where you could make the case that he's not that he's not loyal, because clearly he's trying to achieve some level of his own ends. But at the same time, allying with Elizabeth Swann and Will Turner at the end of the film is the riskier option for keeping the Black Pearl. And in both of those scenarios that he was given, staying with Barbossa or going with Will Turner and Elizabeth and trying to stop Barbossa, both of them were hypothetical scenarios where he would get the Black Pearl. Just one of them was riskier, and he chose the riskier option. Is that proving the idea that he actually was loyal at the end of the day?
I don't know that that's the strongest proof of his loyalty, although I think you could make the case, I guess. I think the strongest, and I wouldn't necessarily call him, I wouldn't use the word loyal, although I think he is loyal to an extent, right? He's loyal to his ship. He's loyal to certain individuals in the sense that, like, he likes these people. He's willing to work with these people more than others. But I think his character throughout the film proves that he's willing to turn on certain people. Like, he actively was going to just dispose of Will Turner, using him as leverage. Granted, I will say we don't know what his intentions were with Turner. He used the term leverage when describing him. That doesn't necessarily mean he was going to abandon Will Turner. But obviously Will Turner wouldn't be appreciative of this plan of using him as leverage. So that's why he doesn't tell him. I think the opening scene when Elizabeth falls in the water and Jack's like, are you guys going to do anything about that? What's going on? And then they're like standing there, and then he jumps in the water and saves her. And then they're trying to give her CPR, and he like rips off her corset, and they're like, "Oh, I never thought of that." And he's like, "You've clearly never been to what did he say?"
I forget. Yeah,
but it's like clearly he cares about people. If he was completely selfish, there was no reason for him to jump in the water after Elizabeth. Absolutely not.
And it's interesting just because a scene like that makes a character who is pretty much despicable into a somewhat likable character, which is interesting. It's like, this is one of those films where they take someone who you, for all intents and purposes, you should not like. Like, yeah. He's nasty in a lot of different aspects, but at the same time, he's doing genuinely good things from time to time. And so you get this dichotomy of, oh, he's kind of fun, he's kind of cool, he does the right thing from time to time, and also he's kind of a POS at the same time. So what do we think about him? I don't know. He's a wild card. And at the end of the day, you kind of root for him, even though he's not really a good guy. It's interesting.
It is also interesting because they don't make him out to be like this absolute degenerate, if you will. like the ways that he makes comments or jokes are more like, it's hard because it's so hard to read him. It's hard to see the intent behind the comments he makes, right? Like when he's talking to Elizabeth and he talks about how the company on this island is better than last time. It's a lot different than like a creepy guy saying that he's glad there's a woman on the island with him. Does that make sense?
I don't know. I think it was kind of creepy.
I agree. It's still like, okay, that, what on earth? But also there's it's a different way of delivering that same message. And Jack Sparrow has like a very unique way of saying and doing things that makes it less like, I don't even know what the word I'm looking for, to be honest. Degenerate, disgusting, uncouth. I don't know. Like he obviously is like just like this pirate who loves money and sex and living on the high seas.
Mm-hmm.
Um
I think maybe some of that goes to you've already accepted him for who he is. And so even though he's like taking a despicable route, if you will, and saying, "Oh yes, hello woman, I am here because, it's only the two of us on the island. Anything could happen," right? It's kind of like, "Oh bro, that's gross. What are you doing?" But at the same time, you expect that from him already because you already know he's a despicable pirate. And you've already kind of bought into his persona at that point in the film.
I was thinking about the same thing, to be honest, when it comes to the character of Inosuke in Demon Slayer, because he does some really out of pocket things, but somehow it is like perceived as acceptable. And then you think about like, if anyone else did those things, there's no way it would just be acceptable for them to do them.
Right.
So yeah, I think you have a point there. When I was watching it, I was like thinking to myself, why? Because like, let's say Commodore Norrington made the same comment, you would look at that and go, "Wow, what a disgusting pig." Right. But when Jack Sparrow says it, you're like, "Okay, he's still a pig, but for some reason, I'm not as mad about it."
Yeah, for sure.
So, anyways,
nice.
I don't know how we got there.
That's what you get. I mean, they end up fighting Barbossa. He ends up getting cursed in the middle of that fight, and so now he's not able to die until...
Well, he cursed himself.
Yeah, he cursed himself, which I don't think makes a ton of sense, to be honest, but we can talk about that at the end. Suffice it to say is that they end up having this big fight, and then they break the curse right when Barbossa gets shot, and then Barbossa dies. All of the cursed pirates become uncursed, and they all lay down their weapons because they're like, shoot, we're actually alive. We don't want to die right now. Holy crap. And then the British win. I guess Elizabeth Swann and Will Turner win, and Jack Sparrow in some ways loses because the Black Pearl is gone. They leave without him, and they follow the code, and he ends up going to the gallows, where he is about to be hung by the neck until dead. And at the very last moment, you see Will Turner and Elizabeth Swann stand up for him and somewhat save him before he jumps off of the rocks, like what happened at the very beginning of the film with Elizabeth Swann, and goes off to his ship and sails away, as a classic pirate scene would. What were your thoughts on the ending of the film and on Elizabeth and Will's arcs in that?
I think the ending is, for Will, is interesting. Elizabeth less so, right? She's not doing this because she wants to be a pirate. She's doing it because she likes Will. At least in my mind. I think the ending is also interesting for Norrington because the revelation that Elizabeth loves Will as opposed to him doesn't really come as a shock to him. It's almost like he was kind of just blinding himself to the reality of the situation, or like when she said, "I'll do this if you marry me," like clearly he didn't truly believe that based on his reaction at the end. But it's like he was still like desperately trying to gain her approval by doing these things for her. Which I think adds to his character's development, especially in the later films. yeah, I mean, I thought the ending was good. I think it also like it does show there's some level of loyalty amongst that specific group of pirates, like with Gibbs being the prominent one in that group. And like Gibbs and Jack's relationship, where he kind of echoes what Elizabeth said earlier and what Barbossa said before too, is like the code's more of a guidelines. Like, are we kidding ourselves? We're pirates. We don't have a rule book.
Right.
So like the idea that there is a code is like, oh yeah, these are kind of generally what we follow, but it's also the idea of like pirates. Loyalty is a extremely valuable commodity when it comes to being a pirate, right? Because as long as you have loyalty and you can trust someone, then you could probably make it. But being able to not trust people is kind of like it comes with the territory of being a pirate because there's no rules. You can't really trust anything. So
Yeah, exactly. And for sure, you see the Elizabeth Swann's character development is only insofar as she goes, "I'm a liar. I used you. Nah, I love this other guy instead." And so it's some level of devolvement of her character more than anything else, as she leads more into what a true pirate would be. And then you see Will Turner as he sees this more as, I am being loyal to this man who has, even though he's backstabbed me in some ways, has saved me, and I feel some obligation to him, and so I'm going to stick by him, even though it might cost me everything.
so
So
what you're telling me is the moral of the story is that women are pirates.
no, I think it's more so set. It's an interesting discussion in this idea that like what is, and I do think this is some of the message of the film is what is more important, like loyalty to the law or loyalty to each other, and it's not necessarily clear if that loyalty is even warranted by the end of the film because Jack Sparrow still is out for himself at the end of the day, right? He gets what he wants and sails off into the distance. For all you know, I mean, it does have a little bit of that stereotypical Disney-esque ending where they're just sitting there like, "Oh, we did it. Good job, guys." And instead of arresting Will Turner and Elizabeth, Norrington's like, dang it. Well, we'll give him a day and then we're going to go chase him. Right. So I think of all of the parts of the film, that part is a little bit like you kind of get it because Norrington is trying to be the honorable gentleman in this whole thing and say, like, you know what? I lost. It is what it is. I'm just going to accept that at the end of the day. And he does like a nice thing, even though no one else deserves to be given clemency in this situation. So his arc is like kind of cool, but at the same time, it's like, why are you letting these guys off the hooks? They're all POSs, they're all bad people, and they all just screwed you over. And you are now not able to do your job as you ought to. So I have a little bit of conflict on that. But overall, yeah, you get a full conclusion to the arcs of each of the characters through that. So that's what you got. What are your thoughts on the lasting impact of this film? And other thoughts about how the film was developed are also welcome here.
Clearly, it had an impact. Pirates of the Caribbean films are very well known. The fact that they took a ride and made a movie off of it, I don't know if we had done that at this point. I mean, it was successful. I don't know that Disney really learned from this experience, I guess. It's also very different than your traditional film, right? Your protagonist is kind of a scoundrel and a scum. He also doesn't technically grow a ton. He's like super ambiguous, which is what I think makes Pirates of the Caribbean very unique, is that this main character, you don't know what he's thinking, like at all the entire time. You can kind of get glimpses into it, but it's like, I don't even know if Disney could learn from this in the sense of like, would this work in a ton of other films?
Yeah. I mean, especially because a lot of these films from Disney are all about the good guy, you know, the person who does the right thing all the time. This is just so out of left field in comparison to that it's like you're creating very organic characters who are dealing with situations as they come in the way that best suits them, rather than trying to you know, I don't know, the great fight between good and evil, and you have the good side being oppressed by the bad guys, and you know, all of that stuff that we stereotypically see. It's not easy to replicate that in an organic way, or take pieces from this and play them into those when you don't have those same types of characters. So yeah, for sure, I see what you're saying there. Yeah, clearly it had an impact. We had what, 5 movies? I'm pretty sure we had 5.
Yeah, and there was going to be a 6th one, and then we had the Amber Heard trials.
Right. Yeah. Good old Amber. So, you know, we had a lot that came after this, so it had an impact for sure. And I remember watching these as a kid and being like, oh my goodness, I want to be a pirate now too. Not really, you know, knowing what that full impact of that really would be, but you know, when you're 10, whatever. It's a fun-loving film for a reason. A lot of people like it. The only thing I want to note, once again, is the gold I don't think makes a ton of sense, because if you could just pick a piece up and then all of a sudden you're cursed, why isn't Will Turner cursed? Why isn't Elizabeth Swann cursed? Like, does the gold just know your intent and decide you're a bad person, so now you get to get cursed? Like, it's not clear how the curse actually works, other than it conveniently curses the people who need to be cursed at the right times.
Yeah, I mean,
but you know,
I think it was kind of like, once he got cursed, Jack Sparrow, the question in my mind was like, why didn't he need to put his blood on that altar?
yeah,
right?
I'm assuming it's because they don't have blood, or some form of like they are dead, so their blood isn't real. I don't know.
But they needed Bootstrap Bill's blood, so clearly that's a portion of it.
Yeah, descendancy maybe, but yeah, they said they could have used him, but then they sent him overseas and drug him.
My
to the
other
depths.
question is, why did Bootstrap Bill ever join Davy Jones' crew if he was undead? Like, what does he get out of that?
My understanding was that he was like basically stuck at the bottom of the ocean, like for an indeterminate amount of time. It was like, this friggin' sucks. Let me out. That's my understanding. We could probably get to that in the next film for sure to get a better idea, because I think they actually discuss it in that one, and I haven't seen it in a while, so I wouldn't be able to say for sure right now. What?
I hope they discuss it in that film. I don't remember it happening though.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah. So that's the film. That's what you got. I don't know if you have more to say, but we're gonna get to more of these as they progress, and I think if that's it, that's the pod. So we hope you all enjoyed. We'll be back as we always are next week, and we'll see you all then.